Making his BYU Sports Nation debut, the voice of the Viginia Cavaliers, Dave Koehn. Dave, welcome to BYU Sports Nation.
Guys, appreciate you having me on. Really looking forward to getting out there and seeing all the Provo has to offer.
Have you trained for the altitude in Provo? Are you going to be ready to go 1 through 4 in quarters?
Well, you know, I grew up at about a mile high in Colorado, so I should be pretty acclimated to it. But now the way the rest of the guys are, no predictions there.
Okay, let's get this out of the way. We hear the phrase Wahoo in connection, a nickname, with Virginia sports. Tell us what a Wahoo is and how that came about.
Yeah, this is kind of a funny deal because I get this question a lot for a lot of the programs we play that we don't normally. Virginia is one of these programs that's just so steeped in so much history, not just the program, but I mean the university as a whole with Jefferson and all the background, and everywhere you walk, you feel like you're walking on a historical landmark. But the history behind what a Wahoo is, it was around the turn of, I want to say around 1900, maybe late 1800s, Virginia's fans would come to games, and it's as simple as this. Their fans would chant, their cheer would be Wahoo Wah, and so the rest, as they say, is history. I wish it was a little more glamorous than that, but that's where it all started.
Wahoo Wah, okay.
I wonder how Thomas Jefferson feels about that.
Yeah, no, we haven't been able to consult with him, unfortunately.
Dave Koehn, the voice of the Virginia Cavaliers on BYU Sports Nation. This is an interesting football team that's coming into Provo. Under Mike London, you pick up your first ACC win in a long time. You beat a ranked opponent in Louisville. Really emotional. Fans stormed the field in Charlottesville. What's the feeling now as you come to Provo about where this program is in relation to the powers of national college football?
I think for the first time in a long time around here, there's a feeling of hope. And I think from a year ago, well, really the last 2 years, Virginia has won a big non-conference game early in the season, but they have failed to do anything beyond that. And I think a lot of folks feel like that win against BYU last year was a good non-conference win for this program. But obviously, Virginia just foundered from that point moving forward, going 2-10 in one of the longest seasons in Virginia football history. Now, a lot of those guys are back from a year ago with some key additions and some, to my thinking, some real key maturation. This was a team that had very few seniors, only 5 seniors that played last year. They didn't know how to handle a lot of the things they went through. That's been the biggest difference this year. And I sometimes you hear guys say things, some of the student athletes on the teams that you cover, and you think, all right, that's lip service. I don't know that I feel that it really is this year. They had a players-only meeting on Sunday following the win against Louisville. It was called by the captains, and these guys were saying, look, we need to do what we haven't done the last 2 years. We're tired of winning these games early and then watching the other teams that we beat play in bowl games at the end of the season while we're sitting at home. These guys are seniors saying this is our last chance. I think that has been the sentiment that has really carried this program and been the biggest difference here this season in 2014. Now, granted, it's still a small sample size. So now where does this team go from here? Do they repeat the mistakes of years gone by, the last 2 years? Time will tell. Or is this a team that's going to make that change and kind of make that next leap?
And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, a players-only meeting after a win against a ranked team. I think that says a lot about, like you said, the aims and goals of some of these seniors. Now, is a bowl game the goal for Virginia this year?
No question. I think that this team wants to be playing, and at this point, I think this team expects to be playing in the postseason. The challenge is Virginia's playing as hard a schedule as you could make the case anyone in college football. This is 3 games against top 25 teams to start in the first 4 games of the season for Virginia. They're one of only 2 programs in the country that can say that, having played UCLA, who was then ranked number 7 in the country, and then, of course, last week Louisville, and now you guys. And then the team that wasn't in the top 25 was a top 25 team for what it's worth in the FCS in Richmond. But nonetheless, it doesn't get a whole lot easier. When you look at Virginia's schedule moving forward, the challenge is going to be winning a lot of these 50-50 games, and there's going to be a number of those moving forward. The Coastal Division in the ACC has good teams, but not great teams. You don't have too many of those juggernauts that you just can't beat. Virginia does have to play at Florida State. I think a lot of folks look at that game as one that's going to be a major uphill climb. But you've got games that are winnable, but they're also very losable. So that's the position Virginia's in right now. This season really could. I mean, the difference between winning and losing is going to be about as fine a line as I can remember in recent years.
Dave Koehn, the voice of the Cavaliers on BYU Sports Nation. Mike London has gone through some really rough times, and that's probably an understatement. He was understandably emotional after the win on Saturday. What does that win do for him and the program moving forward?
I think more than anything, it proves that they can win games and find ways to win games under adverse circumstances. I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch that game, but
yes.
Virginia had the lead. And then here it is in the fourth quarter, into my way of thinking, and I understand officials have a very difficult job. It's on the spot, but there was a roughing the passer call against Virginia on third down, Louisville at Virginia's 10. The pass ultimately resulted in an interception for the Cavaliers, but it was overturned by, I'm going to say it, a very controversial pass interference call.
Yeah. It was terrible.
Yeah, it was bad.
I agree, and I usually don't like to kill those guys on the air, but we had a hard time holding back on that one. I mean, there was no advantage gained, clearly, but we could go on and on about that. But at the end of the day, Virginia had to live with it, and they still found a way to win that game, even though one play later, here comes Louisville for the go-ahead points that put them ahead. And years gone by, maybe Virginia folds under those settings, but they found a way to get a win. And as you guys know, winning is contagious, losing is contagious, both directions. So, the hope around here is that Virginia is starting to find a way and learning to win games that they haven't in the past. And I think not only from a fan's perspective in terms of winning fans back, because I do think it slowly starts that process, but just from this team's confidence standpoint, their psychological standpoint, they're starting to learn to win games. And in 2 years ago, I remember back to the year that Virginia went to the Peach Bowl, you're talking about a team that had a number of those close games, but they just somehow found ways to win. And the similarity between that team and this team is the fact that there was senior leadership. And I just think there's no overstating the value of having some guys that you can lean on in that locker room during those tough times.
What's the perception of BYU since they did play last year, Virginia and BYU? Virginia wins a close game, a weird game with the weather delay and everything. What's the perception of BYU now that BYU's ranked and a year later with similar guys?
Well, I think Virginia players, coaches, and fans realize that the Cavaliers are – when I looked at this game on the schedule, I thought this and the Florida State game were going to be the two toughest games Virginia had on its schedule. I just know how tough it is to win in that stadium that you all play in. It is no easy feat. And I know that with the players that you have back and a veteran quarterback in Taysom Hill and that Bronco Mendenhall-led defense that's always strong under him, that it was going to be a challenge. And the other part, you know that these guys remember a year ago. Granted, does it play a huge role in this game? Probably not. But I do think that there's a healthy amount of respect for the Cougars, and I think Virginia also recognizes they got away with one last year in that win against BYU. But again, those are those plays that you thought maybe would that unfold more of those types of wins as the season progressed? Well, it didn't happen that way last year. You wonder if it will start to happen that way this year for the Cavaliers. But it's a healthy dose of respect, long story, made short, from Virginia as you look at what BYU brings and what they're about.
Virginia brings in a star-studded defense with Anthony Harris and Eli Harold and Max Vallis, guys that, let's be honest, will probably play at the next level in the NFL. What's the most underrated part of the Virginia Cavaliers football team?
Ooh, that's a good question. Underrated part, I will say, I think that linebacking core for the Cavaliers, Henry Coley, who probably is the biggest, well, it's hard to say he versus Anthony Harris, who's a bigger leader on this team, but I think Henry Coley, a guy who's not been blessed with tremendous athleticism in that middle linebacker spot, but his ability to run this defense and get plays in, and to me, one of the greatest parts of this young season so far was watching Henry Coley go against Brett Hundley, the quarterback for UCLA. He said going in, Coley told me, this is going to be a chess match. I got to be able to watch him and track him down. He did an unbelievable job against Hundley in that offense. UCLA only scored one offensive touchdown in that entire game. Yeah. They scored 21 points off of turnovers. The defense was outstanding against this, prolific Heisman candidate and Hundley. And Coley was a big part of the reason why he and Daquan Romero, the other linebacker veteran in that linebacking core, have been terrific in terms of just really knowing where to be. Now, again, the athleticism isn't always there for Coley in particular, but his ability to set his teammates up, and that's going to be a key in this game on Saturday. There's no doubt in my mind when you're going against a read option attacks, not drastically different from UCLA, perhaps more like a Georgia Tech team just because of all the different options that you have. But I think that discipline and lining people up in the right places is going to be huge to try and prevent those plays from breaking down.
To me, the matchup to watch on Saturday is BYU's rush offense versus the front seven of Virginia. I think that's going to be so interesting to watch. What's the matchup you're looking at?
Yeah, I think that's going to be intriguing. That's one of the ones I'm going to be watching, certainly. The other one is I'm curious to see if Virginia's passing attack can establish itself against BYU. I think the Cougars' run defense has obviously been sensational, and let's be real, for the Cavaliers, the rushing attack has been a bit of a challenge with a remade offensive line from last season. But I think from a passing standpoint, Grayson Lambert is the quarterback. Now, there's still a chance we'll see Matt Johns, and I wouldn't be surprised if he got in there at some point this weekend. But last weekend, Grayson Lambert, a first-year starter, kind of started to establish himself against Louisville. It wasn't a sensational game, but it was a good game. This guy does have tools. He was a guy who was recruited and offered by Alabama, along with a number of the big schools out there, a four-star recruit. A big arm, big upside, but he's learning his way. He's got great targets to throw to, though. I think Virginia's one of its great strengths this year is that receiving corps. Big receivers that will go up and get the ball in a way that we haven't seen in the last 6 years at UVA. I think that's going to be intriguing to see if they can get anything going against the BYU defense, at least through the air.
I was talking to one of your colleagues last night, Jay James, and we had that discussion that Virginia has to pass the ball if they hope to escape Provo with a win. Who's the guy, besides Grayson Lambert with his arm, that is the best offensive player for the Cavaliers?
Offensively, well, in terms of the passing attack, I think one of the great things about it is there isn't just one guy. There are a number of different options that the Cavaliers have been able to turn to. Darius Jennings, the senior, is the smallest of the guys, but he's also probably the fastest, and he's proving to be the most reliable after he's had some inconsistencies through the years in the past. He's had some drops that really hurt the Cavaliers, but he seems a little bit more like a remade guy. But then there's a ton of these young receivers that have been really turning heads. A redshirt freshman, Andre Livroni, a true freshman, Donnie Dowling, another young guy, Kanan Severin, in his first year really playing with any significance this year, Keon Johnson, a sophomore. All these guys are 6'2" plus in height, and they can go up and get it. Miles Gooch last week, sort of an unsung hero,